Hello, Shirley Adams for the Sewing Connection, Series 17, Program 11. One of the lovely things about making your own clothing and working with fabrics is that they can be whatever you want them to be. For example, maybe I want to wear this olive blouse with these purple pants. Some might think that a strange combination. But if I had a jacket or a vest with both those colors in it, the pairing would be obvious. I'm in the process of making a jacket whose color has been changed, and this is how I've done it. Now, until I get that jacket done, I very easily could just wear this combination belt because it has the purple and the olive in it, so that's one thought, something to combine the two. Or also I have a great scarf that has purple and olive in it, and maybe I could wear that scarf. But what I'm really working on now is this jacket, and it's a hand-woven fabric, which I just love. I just love to admire what weavers do. I'm not one of them, but this one I thought was really pretty, and it was kind of changing colors in that it started more in the pinky line, the reds, the burgundies up here at the top, and as it goes down it gets a little bit more into greens and purples, so it changes color from one end to the other. But I wanted it to be a little bit more obvious to wear olive with it, even though it had some in it. So I saw about the same time I bought the fabric, I saw this yarn. And this yarn is a combination, of course, of purple and olive. And I thought, what if I weave some of this into that fabric to change the color? Because it is so loosely woven, there's no reason why that couldn't be done. So what I've done, you can see every place there's a sparkle and every place there's a thread hanging out here, that I've woven some rows. And after I had this all carefully woven, because it ravels very easily, it's kind of loosely woven, after I had it all woven as much as I decided I wanted in it, then I have backed it with some interfacing, some fusible interfacing to glue it together. Now this is a pretty new one that's on the market. It's a lofty weft, and it stays nice and soft. It gives it a little loft. It is just perfect for these hand-woven fabrics. I wish they had had it years ago, because I have a lot of other hand-wovens I would rather have had this in. But all I had of that fabric was this, and I can fit on that the front and back of my jacket, and that's it. I have to do something else for the sleeves. And in order to avoid having any seams possible, even though this one has a center back seam, you don't have to have one. This one just happens to be absolutely straight, and even if it had a little shape, I still would cut it on the fold so I wouldn't have that extra seam. So what I've done is just put the stitching line of their pattern onto the fold of the fabric so I can cut it in one piece and break it up as little as possible. Also, I've added the facing to the front of my jacket, and I'm cutting that as one piece so that it'll just be a fold under there at the front instead of a seam, to make it as easy as possible. Now, there wasn't enough fabric here to do anything else with, so I thought I might as well add this. What I could have done for facings is just using another fabric. They won't show anyway. But notice what I've also done that I talked about last program. I have put these underarm points here and here on the same line because I want the same stripe to go around my body. And so this is the way it'll do it. Now usually stripes would go lengthwise perhaps, but this one I decided no, I wanted the rosier colors up near my face and the darker, deeper purples down there so that they blend into my pants. So think it out very carefully before you lay your pattern and cut out. Because once you cut, that's it, no more chances on it. Well, this is all I had, and I don't have enough for sleeves, and I wanted a jacket, not a vest. So what I've done is just find a wool crepe, and it's very close to the same colors, the same purples, but then to change its color, to make it look like it belongs in this jacket, I've added this yarn to it also. So there's some of the same yarn in both these things to make them coordinate. Don't you just love to do things like this? This is the fun of sewing, and it delights me enormously. While I was looking for this fabric in the store, I found these buttons, and they look like they have been woven also. So they just kind of blend in. Everything ties together so beautifully once you go shopping and find what there is to find. What I've also done to these sleeves, by the way, it's a two-piece sleeve. I've just overlapped it in the middle so that the stitching line would be about there. And it was a large enough sleeve that I thought, I want this a little bit smaller. So I've overlapped it generously to make it a little smaller. And then at the top, you saw me do this three programs ago, just make a dart at the top of the sleeve, and this would turn into a dart. So this will have a dart probably because it's rather closely woven, and it probably won't want to ease in nicely with stitching. So this is what I've done to change that. But what I also did as I was doing this stitching on here is I used some sew-in sheer interfacing instead of a fusible. And after I got this all finished, I thought, I don't like the feel of it. It was too stiff. And by the time I had all these stitches on, I'm not going to take those off. What I did is just carefully cut away the rest of it around the stitching, get rid of the rest of it. And then in this also, I've put that lofty weft so it stays soft. And I like the sleeve much better that way. But let's go over and see how this is all done. We have, as I'm walking past them, we have some other things here on the mannequins. And this vest is one. Who would wear a rhubarb vest and pants with a purple blouse? Well, maybe if you change the color of it. And so I have a blend here in this yarn that I've couched all that yarn on the vest because I love the technique. I love to do it. But also it enables me to wear the purple with the rhubarb. And I like these odd color combinations. They're kind of pretty. You see these done a lot these days. Over on the other one, it's that stripe that's in olives and purples and magenta. But what I did to make it go with that skirt is put a little piping around the edges. So there also I've changed the color a little bit by putting that piping on to make it obvious why I'm wearing that skirt with that blouse. So sometimes you just have to make it a little bit more obvious is what the deal is. Well, here is another of the sleeves, the second sleeve, and always practice the technique, whatever you're going to try, on a scrap of fabric to make sure you know what you're doing before you get into the actual project. And what I'm going to do is couch this on. I'll just, the rest of the fabric I have here I'm going to make something else out of, so right for now I won't use that. I'll just use a piece of fabric of any type. Now this is an especially difficult yarn to couch on, and the reason for that is that there are really two yarns here that are loosely twisted together. There's this one with a lot of metallic in, and there's this mohair one. And the trouble with couching it on is because they are so loosely twisted, they separate. And then you end up couching one of them on and you have to go back and grab the other one again. So it does make it more difficult, but a challenge is fun. Now here's one that's just a mohair, and I've had a lot of you ask me, how do they make those mohair yarns? I'm not a spinner either or a dyer, but I know how they make them. And so you can see this changes color. It just goes to different colors as it goes along. This is how it all starts out. This is called roving. And I found a floral shop of all things down in Albuquerque where I saw this roving. They had a whole lot of it. And what you do, see how the dyer has dyed this? They've just dyed different colors as it goes along. And then as they spin this into yarn, this is called roving, and it's been all carded and combed. The wool fibers, the sheep's fibers have, but it hasn't been spun yet. And it's all pulled out into a long strand instead of this big thick one, and it's spun, and it turns out to be then these variegated yarns. So I think it's kind of an interesting process. I'd love to watch them do it. Well, what I'm going to do is use my beloved Miracle Stitcher. I just love this little thing, and I haven't used it for a couple series now, so I better do some more of it because I'm getting anxiety attacks for not using it more often. And what it is, it comes in this little box, and there are all kinds of instructions and so on, but what it is a completely different foot, and it has a little slot in here that the needle goes in, and yarn also goes in there. There's a little slit on the side of it. And then it has a different needle screw here that's round instead of the usual one. And then it has this little double cup thing that goes on the needle screw. And once I have that in place, then I'm going to put a spool pin on top, and I'm going to put my yarn in my lap, and we're going to get going doing something here. Okay, now we just take the spool pin and put it up here on top, because there's a little place there for an extra spool pin. And then we're going to be ready to go once we set the stitches. Now I've already dropped the feed dog because you don't want it in play. You want to do free motion stitching here. It's already dropped, but I'm on straight stitch, and so I need to go to, whoops, I didn't need to do that. I needed to just go to zigzag. And then I don't want it to be all this wide because it would hit the edge of the foot. And so I've got to get it narrower. I want to go way down to 1.5. And it doesn't even matter about the length because I'll control that. It's just the width you want to be concerned about. Okay, this is all threaded, by the way, with monofilament thread on top because you want that clear thread. You don't want it to show in most cases. There are sometimes maybe you would want it to show, blend in, or maybe accent it by putting metallic in. You can do that, but I don't want this to show. So I have the clear. Down below I just have a white bobbin thread. Because it'll be on back side and not show. And this won't really show up very well on this dark. I'm just going to turn it over and we'll put the back, whoopsie, we'll put the back side up instead, which is just a fleece. But fine, you can see it better on this white than you can on the dark. And what I'm going to do here is just make little squiggles, the same as are on the sleeve. Now, where I learned to do that is several programs ago we were doing things with shears, and I had a quilted vest, and I had these squiggly lines in that quilted vest. They just sort of went back and forth and looked like ripples in the water. And at the time I was stitching that just with thread on the vest, I was thinking, wouldn't that be pretty done in yarn? I like to take one thing I learned and apply it to something else, but in a different way always, so that you don't realize it's the same thing. I'm just going to put this yarn down in my lap and then put this over the top. Now this is a mohair yarn, and it's really a nice one for doing this miracle stitching. And what I wanted to do is loop it over the extra spool pin, and then down here I'm going to put it through the front of those two little cups. There are two of them, and I want it through the front cup. If you have a real thin thread or cord that you're putting on, you'd put it through the back cup, but this front one is a bigger one. And then I'm going to put it through this little slot in the foot so that it, along with the needle thread, just goes in back here. And then I can put my hoop on and get going. Now what I always want to do, and I'll just pull this a little bit tighter, what I always want to do as I'm doing this is make sure it isn't pulling from my lap, because if it pulls you'll end up seeing just stitches and you won't see any yarn being stitched on, couched on. And so I'm going to, I'll start up here and then we'll go along and you can see what's happening. So every once in a while you have to stop, and I'll put the needle down for that purpose so that I can then get some more yarn loose here, since I didn't wind it in a ball since it's still on this. And let's see what's going. This is such fun. This particular yarn I used once before. It's telling me that the feed dog's down, and yep, I know it. Okay, and I'll just make a little ball here maybe to start. And then it's just letting it do its thing. And you can just move it back and forth, and if you feel that the yarn's not thick enough in one place, then go back and let it stitch some more there. And you can go back at any time, even after you've cut it off. If you decide, oh, I wish I had more yarn there, go back and put some more on. And you can move any direction with this. There are no limits. But I like this variegated yarn. I like the way it suddenly is going to just change color. And it's when the yarn starts pulling that maybe you just get stitching and no yarn showing there. And so if that's the case, go back and do it again. This is a place where you do have a second and a third and as many chances as you want, because it's not over till it's over. You just keep working with it. Anyway, this can be a really fun effect. Now, after you get going and after you get used to it, basically what you want to do is stitch fast but move slowly is usually what you do. But anyway, what I did on that sleeve is not quite as heavy. I sort of went back and forth like this and just did little ripples in the water. And see, here's where the yarn came loose because it was pulling too tightly over here. And if that happens, if it comes loose, then that's all right. I'll just get the needle back up and I'll get it back through the little slot and make sure it does have some slack so it won't do that. But nothing's lost because you just work your way back again and go ahead and stitch more yarn on it. So this is just a nice relaxing thing to do, and I absolutely love to use this. But you can see it makes really nice squiggles, and it really would only take a few minutes with this gadget anyway to do that whole sleeve. So it's a very quick quick process, really. Well, anyway, that's how I've changed color on this sleeve so that it does just join the rest of the jacket and make it all look like it belongs together. I'm going to go back here and show you some other color changes. Last series I had a charcoal dress, and there was a whole program about mesh fabrics. They ravel very easily. They're very light and airy. And I thought, isn't that the perfect fabric to do some color changing on? So here's the idea. Now, this ravels so easily that not only can you, if you want to, ravel out the ends, but there's no reason why you can't ravel out rows and make some sort of a design in it. And so what I have here is several yarns just pulled, and you can see you can make kind of nice striped fabric with this. That you can sort of see through and give it some texture instead of being just a solid color fabric. So here's one thing you might do. Here I didn't ravel any out. I did this the way I was doing the jacket itself, the way I was doing it with putting the extra yarn in, the chartreusey looking yarn. Here I was just weaving this in without pulling any yarns, but that's a possibility. If I wanted to get a metallic look in here, I've already woven a few rows. And the easy way to do that, of course, is to use a tapestry needle because it has that big eye and you can thread it through easily and just go ahead and weave it then. So that's one thing you might do. Here's where the threads are pulled. But what I thought was really fun is when you start pulling threads, as many as you want, or yarns, properly called, the yarns of the fabric, when you start pulling a lot of them, and you pull as many as you need to make the width you need. This is a pretty variegated ribbon, and it's woven through here by just pulling enough yarns that there's room for it. So here I have, I don't know, maybe a dozen yarns pulled, but that makes room for the ribbon. Here I have this looks like miniature Christmas tinsel almost, and I have that woven through by pulling yarns. Here's how you pull a yarn. You just get a hold of one from the end, and it ravels very easily. And I'm going to weave through it what this time? How about, I haven't tried this cord yet. I'll weave this. Well, it looks like it needs to be a little bigger, so I'll pull another cord or two so that we can make it a little bigger, the space, so that we can get that cord through without it pulling and making any problems. Okay, about one more yarn and we're ready to go. You could weave or ravel yards of this fabric and texture it in a very short period of time because it does ravel so easily. And this is true of a lot of fabrics. Loosely woven ones as a whole are the ones that would do it. Now there are a few different tools you can use to weave this. One is a tapestry needle, which works out really well for most things. Another is this bodkin, and it has sort of a ball on the end of it so it won't get caught in anything, and it has a still bigger eye. Or another one, if you're doing ribbons and cords that won't go through these, then there's always this possibility, this little clamp. And what it is the clamp down here, you get a hold of whatever it is you want to weave through, and then you move the slide down there to hold it tightly, and then you can weave it through with this end in front. So anything can be woven really with one of these tools or the other. I'm going to just try this one. So I'll put the cord through and then let's see how it does it. Now what makes this fast also, this weaving, is the fact that you don't have to go in and out every yarn that's in there. You can just do it in and out of groups of them. For instance, I would come down here and then a ½ inch later I'd come up. And so just by ½ inches maybe you can do this. It doesn't need to be all that time consuming. Try it on a scrap, of course, first to see what you have and to see what effect you're trying to get and to see if you like what you're producing. So here's how this would look, and I rather like that. That might be pretty to do some stripes in some garment like this. So there's a possibility. Here are some other things that I've woven in, and I already did this cord over here, but this is a nice little ribbon that's all embroidered that you can buy inexpensively by the yard. That would certainly give this very somber charcoal a completely different look to have this ribbon woven in. And here again you can see about every ½ inch is where I caught it, and yet because everything's dark it doesn't show up like this one shows up because of the light cord. You can see exactly how my weaving was. Here you really can't even tell. So something like this you can do very fast. I thought it might even be fun to do something textury like this crimped ribbon. So I have it woven in and out, and with that ribbon you just sort of pull it out so it doesn't shrink up the fabric. So get it pulled out a little bit, but that could make an interesting effect. Or get some other colors in if you want to, like this pink organdy ribbon that I have here. Makes it look completely different. You'd never recognize it as the same fabric. or you can buy these packages of yarn. And what they are, about 10-yard lengths probably of each of them, yarns, cords, and maybe just put one of each one, weave it in so that you kind of change the color of that by making it a lot pinkier, and then maybe wear a pink jacket over the dress that you make out of this because it looks like it belongs now with something pink. Down here what I have is silk ribbons, and these are all woven through. Now these are all narrow ribbons. They are all the same size. They're just a different color each time. But that's a very distinct possibility if you want to make it very colorful. And so you can always try something like that. Now I find that there is nothing that won't weave through here. I was concerned about maybe some of these, the texture, the chenille one here. I thought, well, maybe it won't pull. Anything goes through this very easily. And even though I don't have a loom and I'm not a weaver, it makes me feel like I'm a much more accomplished person, that I can do all these extra things without actually having the equipment. So that makes it fun too. There is no end to the versatility, the variety of things that you can do when you sew. What I also might do on my purple is, I already started a project, I don't know, a few programs ago that I haven't finished yet, and it's this one. It's the same fabric, in fact. It's the same fabric that I'm using for the sleeves. So this is something else that I can wear with the pants that I'm wearing, and maybe with the jacket on top, maybe just with the pants and the blouse alone. But here I've changed the color by using this variegated ribbon and just stitching it on instead of weaving it through, because this creped fabric, these creped yarns, they're crimped sort of, and you are not very easily going to pull any of those out. It's not going to ravel easily, so you can't pull them out. Therefore you'd stitch on top of something like this, or if you wanted to put yarns on it, you would maybe do that miracle stitching. Or when I did the yarns on the rhubarb vest back there, this vest, I didn't use the miracle stitcher for this. I just used a foot that had an indentation under the base of it and the platform of it underneath, so that it would kind of hold the yarn in place. Now some of the feet that you could use for this might be a cord foot or a braid foot, depending on what you have with your machine. And I like to have with my machine every foot they produce, because it enables you to do things that you couldn't do without that particular foot. So whether it's the cord or the braid foot, or whether it's the clear foot that you do different decorative stitches with, even that would have an indentation underneath. Or a few programs ago, I was using the pin tuck foot, the one that has a big indentation underneath, and I found that perfectly holds a cord, or a yarn in that case. I was putting some yarn on so that you can zigzag over the top. Now anytime I'm going to zigzag like that, I want to decide what kind of thread to use, so that's what I was trying on this. And one of them that I tried was the same color as the same rhubarb color thread I have here, and I found that when I zigzagged that on, the zigzag showed. And I didn't want that to happen. So that wasn't the best choice here. You always have to do samples, really, to make sure that you're doing the best thing. Here I used some glitz thread, and it's also kind of a red color, and I wanted to get a little bit more glitz, and that isn't bad, but I can still see a slight zigzag with that. So that also wasn't the effect I wanted. I ended up putting it all on with the monofilament thread so that you couldn't see it at all, and because you don't want to see your zigzag in most cases. You really just want to see the yarn that's there. But as long as you have the right foot to hold it in place, then you can do a beautiful job. And what I was doing on that vest, because I had the rows so close together, I don't know how many rows I put on that vest, quite a few. But because I was putting so many rows on, this was easy to do with that foot that holds things just right for the pin tucking. So when I was doing this, notice how I have some of these rows pin tucked. I have about 3 rows every time, not pin tucked, but using the pin tuck foot to put them on. And then I did the band and so on quite heavily. I was so pleased to find a combination button also, the purple and rhubarb, so that it just brought everything together. But then after I got finished, it didn't look heavy enough right in here. And so this is when I did go to the miracle stitcher and just did squiggles round and round, is what has happened right here, to get all this on. And it's miraculous how it is a miracle stitcher indeed. It's miraculous how you can change the whole look of a fabric by doing something like this. Now, I like things that are asymmetrical, as you well know. And so as this came around this side, it doesn't look the same at all. Instead of all these rows that are sort of fanning out, these are just solid rows, and they're just running parallel with each other. So it's a different look. You really are a designer every time you sew, because everything you do is different than what anybody else is going to do. And this is the joy of it, I think, the fact that everything you do is so original. So the next thing I'm going to try, I'll go back to my drawers that contain yarns and ribbons and see what else I can do. I have a whole lot of this fabric left, and it really fascinates me, the different things you can do with it. So I'm all ready to do something there. Now, what I can see with this one is I have a skirt and a top right now that I'm wearing. They are absolutely plain. But what I can see with the extra fabric I have is making a jacket of this. And I'm going to put something glittery and something metallic in all those spaces that I make, because I really want to turn that into something dressy instead of daytime. So it's very simple to do that, whether you're changing the colors or the mood or the occasion. You can do it. Well, we've been quite colorful lately, so now let's tone it down. Let's go neutral and deal with non-color, even to using them for accents. Next time, see you right here.